The Honorable Barry O'Farrell, Premier in New South Wales. The Honorable Christopher Harcher, Minister for Resources. Honorable Gregory Pierce. Honorable Victor Dominello. Honorable Don Harwin, Secretary Alberto Rosario, Ambassador William Tweedle, Ambassador Belen Anota, other members of the Cabinet present, Consul General, Mr. John Robertson, members of Parliament, members of the Philippine and Australian business delegations, honored guests. Before I begin the formal speech, I think it, and I apologize to those who have heard it last night, but I think it bears repeating. Australia really has a special place in my heart. And I do not talk about MacArthur's visit here. I was a bit too young at the time. But during the martial law years, at the start of the martial law years, members of our household staff were not spared the horrors of martial law. Some of them were picked up arbitrarily, not through virtue of a warrant of arrest signed by a competent court, but merely the say-so of the martial law administration. And one of them was being, well, most of those who were picked up were being forced to turn and give false witness against my father. Some of them were no longer in our employ, having gotten married. And one of them, in particular, disappeared at the start of martial law, returns to our household, and he's wearing sunglasses because underneath his eyes are so puffed up, his cheeks are so swollen, and he had, I think, if at all, 3 pieces of his teeth remaining because of the beatings that he suffered under the tortures of the martial law regime. And why do I mention this? There was talk and there was fear that if he refused to turn witness against my father, he would eventually be killed. And unfortunately, the martial law regime actually coined the phrase called salvaging when they want to have enforced disappearances or extrajudicial killing. And the connection with Australia is this. My parents had a very good and dear Australian friend. And he cooperated, conspired with my mother to finally smuggle this person out of the country. And as a very young kid, I do recall going to our airport, not meeting anybody, not sending anybody off, looking at this plane and ensuring that this person did manage to leave the country. He stayed there for a few years, moved on to America, and still alive at this present time. And if it were not for this Australian friend, then he would have been perhaps not be with us these days. Now, I do mention this also because when martial law was proclaimed, it seemed our world had turned upside down. My father was thought to have been one of 2 potential candidates of the Liberal Party to run for presidency, and at that time we only had 2 parties in the country. And since Marcos was turning to be the most unpopular leader around, chances are the president in 1973 would have been from our party. But from being one of the top contenders for the top post in the country, he became #1 on the order of battle of martial law. And nobody wanted to be associated with us when martial law was proclaimed. There were instances when people would cross the street to avoid being with my mother, or being seen with my mother, or even being suspected of having talked to any of us. Those were days when loyal friends suddenly were very sparse. But our Australian friends, throughout the whole period of martial law, were a constant source of support and nurturing. Hence, I was part of the excitement of coming here, was in a sense to see a land that really nurtured people who were not afraid to fight for that which is right, not only during our martial law period, but also during the time of World War II, in Korea, in Vietnam, and so on. Mr. Premier, allow me to thank you, therefore, and the people of New South Wales for this very, very warm welcome. This is my first ever visit to Australia and to Sydney, and it is truly a remarkable experience being in the city of the Opera House, the Harbour Bridge, and the various landmarks that make this the most populous city in Australia, a global tourist destination. I understand it is also home to approximately half of the Filipino-Australian community, who I understand when you mention being noisy at times, that seems to be a trait. The friendship between Australia and Philippines is nothing short of historic. Our countries are firm believers in democracy. Our respective peoples cherish the same values of kindness, hospitality, and compassion. Historically, we have been willing to be comrades in arms in defense of freedom. As I already mentioned, during World War II, even as Bataan and Corridor underwent their agony at the hands of the Axis forces, our government initially found refuge in your shores, the same shores from which the Allied forces began their sacrifice-filled war of liberation and democratic redemption. In the Korean War, our countries fought side by side, this time in the Republic of Korea and again for democracy. Here too, my compatriots have built new and prosperous lives. At present, I'm told more than 220,000 Australians can claim Filipino ancestry, of which more than 90,000 reside here in New South Wales. 77% of these Filipino Australians work as accountants, software and applications programmers, nurses, and doctors. They also help build the infrastructure backbone of Australia as engineers and miners, construction workers, welders, and motor mechanics. During this visit, we are being given the chance to further deepen our relationship, and I am grateful for that. I see concrete areas where our countries can create new partnerships or expand existing ones, such as in infrastructure, business process outsourcing, and the extractive industries. I am certain that our shared values and beliefs will lead us to a future where the relationship between our countries will grow even stronger, to the mutual benefit of both Australians and Filipinos. And before I end, sometimes being the chief executive of any entity, in my case of a country, it really does become lonely at the top. There are days when you look at the newspapers and you read the news or read analysis and wonder, how do we actually chart our course through these very nervous times? And at the end of the day, I comfort myself that, we need not travel this road alone. There will be friends, there will be allies, and in Australia and Australians, we have found long committed allies, and we thank you for it. Thank you.